My son-in-law called and yelled, "I emptied your accounts and sold your house so we can get married in Vegas tomorrow. Bye, worthless old man." I just smiled back. He had no idea the document was fake, and all the stolen money and house were a trap. When the police showed up at the airport, he fell to his knees and screamed in horror. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Harold Bishop. I'm 68 years old and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, in the Paradise Valley area. Spent 40 years as a notary public, specializing in real estate transactions and powers of attorney. I've authenticated thousands of signatures, verified countless documents, and developed what my colleagues used to call a photographic memory for paperwork. Thought I'd spend my retirement collecting antique seals and wax impressions from different historical periods. Got over 200 pieces in my collection now. Never imagined I'd need my professional skills to protect myself from my own family. My daughter Brittany is 32. She wasn't always like this. I remember when she was 7, running to hug me when I came home from work, her blonde pigtails bouncing. She'd sit on my lap while I showed her the fancy notary stamps I'd collected that day, asking me what each seal meant. Back then, her eyes sparkled with genuine curiosity, not the cold calculation I see in them now. Everything changed 3 years ago when she met Trent Cole. He's 34, works as a real estate agent, though works is generous. More like he shows up to the office when he feels like it, chases easy commissions, and spends the rest of his time gambling online. Brittany was managing a beauty salon before she got fired for stealing from the register. Never told her I knew about that. I have my sources. Trent is charming, I'll give him that. Tall, good-looking, always dressed sharp, even though I know for a fact he's drowning in debt. He walks into a room like he owns it, flashes that $1,000,000 smile, and people just trust him. That's what makes him dangerous. He knows how to play people. And my daughter, she fell for it completely. The first time Brittany brought him to my house on East Camelback Road, I saw right through him. He complimented the place, asked how much it was worth, wanted to know if I'd ever considered downsizing. When I mentioned I'd bought it 30 years ago for $180,000, his eyes lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. I could practically see him calculating the current value in his head. Around $680,000 in today's market, give or take. Over the following months, the visits became more frequent, and Trent's questions became more pointed. "Harold, do you have a will? Who handles your finances? Do you have power of attorney set up? What about a living trust?" He'd phrase it all as concern. "Just want to make sure you're protected, you know? You're not getting any younger." I'm not stupid. I spent 4 decades dealing with con artists, trying to forge signatures, fake documents, steal inheritances. I know the signs. But what really confirmed my suspicions happened a month ago. I came home early from my afternoon walk. Usually I'm gone for an hour, but it started raining, so I turned back after 20 minutes. When I walked into my study, I heard the drawer of my filing cabinet slide shut a bit too quickly. Trent was standing there, phone in his hand, looking startled. "Harold, didn't hear you come in. Just looking for a pen." I smiled, pointed to the pen holder on my desk, filled with at least a dozen pens. "There you go." He laughed it off, grabbed a pen, made some excuse about needing to write down a client's number. But I saw his phone screen before he turned it off. He'd been taking photos. Photos of my property deed. Photos of my bank statements that I'd foolishly left visible on my desk. That night, after they left, I installed hidden cameras in my study. Tiny things, not even noticeable unless you're looking for them. Professional grade. Cost me $2,400, but worth every penny. For the next 3 weeks, I watched. Trent came over twice when I was napping in my bedroom. Both times he went straight to my study, photographed more documents, even tried the locked drawer where I keep sensitive papers. When that didn't work, he measured the lock with his phone's ruler app. Planning to come back with the right tools, I'd bet. Brittany was complicit. I saw the text she'd leave out accidentally when I'd walk into the room. Screenshots to Trent. "Dad's taking his pills. Forgetful lately." She was setting the stage, building a narrative that I was losing my mental faculties, that I needed help managing my affairs. The worst part? Watching my daughter transform into someone I didn't recognize. She stopped calling me Dad 2 years ago. Now it's just Harold, spoken with this detached politeness that cuts deeper than any insult. She looks at me like I'm an obstacle, not a parent, like I'm a bank account with an inconvenient pulse. Last week, things escalated. I was sitting in my living room, pretending to watch TV, when Brittany and Trent arrived unannounced. Trent sat down across from me, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, put on his most sincere face. "Harold, Brittany and I have been talking. We're worried about you." "Worried?" I kept my voice neutral. "You're living alone in this big house, getting older. What if something happens? What if you fall, have a medical emergency?" Brittany chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. "We think you should consider letting us help manage things, just temporarily, until you're more settled." "Manage what things?" Trent smiled. "Your finances, the house, legal matters. We could move in, take care of you, make sure everything's handled properly." I looked at Brittany, my daughter, the girl I raised alone after her mother passed, the girl I worked overtime for so she could have dance lessons and summer camps and everything she wanted. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I appreciate the concern," I said slowly, "but I'm doing just fine." Trent's smile tightened just a fraction. "Of course. Just think about it. We're here if you need us." They left shortly after. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling something inside me shift. A line had been crossed. They weren't even being subtle anymore. That evening my phone rang. Trent's name appeared on the screen. I answered. "Harold, we need to talk about your future." His voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "You're getting older. You need help, whether you want to admit it or not." I said nothing. Let him fill the silence. "Brittany and I have decided we're going to step in. For your own good. We can do this the easy way, with your cooperation, or the hard way. Your choice." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, and smiled. Because Trent Cole had just made a critical mistake. He'd shown his hand. And I'm very good at poker. After that phone call, I sat in my study until nearly midnight, thinking. Not about what I'd lost, but about what I needed to do. 40 years as a notary teaches you to read people, spot forgeries, understand legal loopholes, but it also teaches you patience and precision. I thought back to better times, to when Brittany was 14, begging me to teach her calligraphy. I'd spent weeks showing her how to hold the pen, how to control pressure, create those elegant loops and curves. She'd filled notebook after notebook with practice letters, so proud when she finally mastered it. We'd sit at this same desk, my hand guiding hers, her head bent close to mine as we worked. "Dad, look, I made a capital B that looks just like yours." I'd laughed, squeezed her shoulder. "Better than mine, kiddo. You've got talent." Where did that girl go? When did the warmth in her eyes turn cold? I traced it back, year by year. The change started slowly after she dropped out of community college, then accelerated when she got fired from the salon. By the time she met Trent, she was already resentful, already angry at a world she felt owed her more. Trent didn't create the monster. He just gave it direction. But I couldn't wallow in nostalgia. I needed a plan. The next morning, I called my niece, Lindsay Bishop. She's 41, runs a real estate law practice in Scottsdale, 15 years of experience, smart as a whip and trustworthy. We'd always been close, even when Brittany pulled away. We met at her office on the 7th floor of the Scottsdale Financial Plaza. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, leather chairs, that particular smell of expensive legal offices. Lindsay's assistant brought coffee, and I laid out everything. The photos Trent took, his questions, the phone call. Lindsay's face darkened as she listened. When I finished, she sat back, fingers steepled under her chin. "Uncle Harold, this is serious. He's planning to forge a power of attorney, maybe more. With your documents photographed, he has everything he needs." "I know. We need to protect your assets immediately, and we need to be smart about it." I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next 2 hours, we crafted a plan. A trap, really. Lindsay pulled up property records on her computer, showed me a house at 1523 West Monroe Street. Foreclosed property, owned by a bank, sitting empty for 6 months, worthless for any real transaction. "What if," Lindsay said slowly, "Trent thought this was your house?" I smiled. "Go on." We spent the rest of the week executing our strategy. First, Lindsay helped me establish an irrevocable living trust. My real house, my real savings, everything of actual value went into that trust, with Lindsay as the trustee. $680,000 in property, $340,000 in savings, all legally protected and completely invisible to anyone digging into my personal accounts. Then came the creative part. I created dummy documents. A fake deed for the Monroe Street property, complete with notary stamps I'd kept from my working days. Bank statements showing accounts with $127,000, printed on authentic bank letterhead I'd saved years ago. The numbers were real enough, but the accounts? Those were decoys. I opened them with minimal balances, just $300 total, enough to keep them active. I assembled everything in a folder marked Important Documents, and left it in my study's filing cabinet, the one Trent had tried to open. I made sure it was now conveniently unlocked. Then I played my part, started acting a bit more forgetful around Trent and Brittany, left my reading glasses in odd places, asked them to repeat things, let them see me struggle with my phone, built their confidence that I was slipping, that I'd be easy to manipulate. "Harold, are you okay? You asked me that question twice already," Brittany said one afternoon, concern in her voice that might have been genuine if I didn't know better. "Did I? Sorry, mine's not what it used to be." I watched Trent's eyes light up, watched him exchange glances with Brittany. They were practically rubbing their hands together. 3 days ago, I set the final piece. I mentioned casually over dinner that I was thinking of visiting an old colleague in Sedona for a couple of weeks. Needed to clear my head, enjoy some time away. "That's a great idea," Trent said immediately. "You should go. Brittany and I can watch the house for you." "Would you? That would be helpful." "Of course. Take your time. We'll take care of everything." I bet you will, I thought. The night before my supposed trip, I left a blank power of attorney form on my desk, right next to a pen, right next to that Important Documents folder. Not subtle, but I was counting on Trent's greed overriding his caution. That evening, after they thought I'd gone to bed, I watched from my bedroom through the camera feed on my tablet. Trent crept into my study like a cartoon burglar, looked around, then spotted the form. He picked it up, examined it, then pulled out his phone. For the next 20 minutes, I watched him practice forging my signature, using the documents he'd photographed weeks ago as reference. He tried it on scratch paper first, getting the pressure right, the angle, the flow. When he finally got it close enough, he carefully filled out the power of attorney form, forged my signature at the bottom, and used one of my old notary stamps to make it official. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own stamps, used to authenticate fraud against me. But here's what Trent didn't know. I'd modified that stamp, changed one tiny element that any real notary would catch immediately, but that would look legitimate to an untrained eye. Insurance, in case I needed to prove it was used without my permission. I watched him photograph the fake documents about the Monroe Street property, the dummy bank statements. Watched him text Brittany. "Got everything. This is really happening." Her response came fast. "How much?" "Over 600K total. We're set." "OMG. Vegas wedding, here we come." I closed the tablet and lay back on my pillow. The trap was set. All I had to do now was leave town and let Trent hang himself. The next morning, I packed a bag, hugged Brittany goodbye, shook Trent's hand, and drove away from my house. Watched them in my rearview mirror, standing in the driveway, waiting for me to disappear around the corner. I made it exactly 3 blocks before pulling over. I sat there for a moment, looking at my hands on the steering wheel. These hands had signed thousands of legitimate documents, helped countless families protect their assets, their futures. Now I was using everything I'd learned to catch my own daughter in a crime. The sadness hit me then, not anger, just this deep, hollow sadness. But I pushed it down, straightened my shoulders, and drove to Sedona. Because sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do is let their child face the consequences of their choices. And I was going to teach Trent Cole the most expensive lesson of his life. I spent 2 days in Sedona at a small hotel, watching my phone like a hawk. The camera feeds from my study streamed directly to my tablet, encrypted and secure. For the first day, nothing happened. Trent and Brittany stayed visible, playing the role of concerned caretakers. She even posted on social media about taking care of Dad's place while he gets some rest. The comments were predictable. You're such a good daughter. Family first, if they only knew. The second evening, around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I pulled up the feed. There was Trent, creeping into my study, looking over his shoulder like a cartoon burglar. He went straight for the filing cabinet, pulled out the fake documents, and photographed each page methodically. The deed to 1523 West Monroe Street, the bank statements showing $127,000 across multiple accounts, property appraisals, tax records. I watched him study the forged power of attorney form he'd filled out the night before I left. He held it up to the light, examining his handiwork, smiled. Actually smiled at his own forgery. The arrogance was breathtaking. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. I couldn't hear his side of the conversation through the camera, but I could read his body language, excited gestures, pacing. He kept pointing at the documents, laughing. Probably talking to Brittany, confirming the jackpot. The next morning, they both showed up at my house. I watched them sit in my living room, surrounded by my belongings, planning how they'd spend my money. Trent had a legal pad, writing columns of numbers. Brittany scrolled through her phone, showing him pictures, wedding venues in Las Vegas, expensive hotels, designer dresses. "We can finally have the life we deserve," I heard Brittany say through the audio feed. Her voice carried that edge of resentment I'd grown so familiar with. No more struggling, no more pretending. And all it took was Harold being too senile to notice what was happening right under his nose. Trent replied. They laughed, both of them. Sitting in the home I'd built, laughing about stealing from me, something cold settled in my chest, not anger, something more calculating. I'd dealt with criminals before, people who tried to forge documents, steal inheritances. But they were strangers. This was my daughter, my own blood, and she was looking at me like I was nothing more than a retirement fund waiting to be liquidated. The following days became a masterclass in deception. Trent transformed into the world's most attentive son-in-law. He called me in Sedona 3 times a day. "Just checking in, Harold, making sure you're okay, taking your medication." His voice dripped with false concern. "I'm fine, Trent. Really." "Good, good. Hey, when you get back, we should talk about some paperwork. Nothing urgent. Just want to make sure everything's in order for you. You know, in case anything happens." "What kind of paperwork?" "Oh, just regular stuff. Power of attorney, maybe. So someone can help if you need it. Purely precautionary." I played dumb. I suppose that makes sense. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. "Exactly. See, you get it. We'll take care of everything when you're back." After he hung up, I sat on the hotel balcony, looking out at the red rocks of Sedona, thinking about how expertly he was setting the stage, making it seem like I was incompetent, like I needed help, building a narrative that would make his theft look almost justified. We were just trying to protect his assets. He wasn't capable anymore. Brittany played her part too. She sent me texts. "Miss you, Dad. Take your time. Rest." The word Dad appearing for the first time in years. How convenient that her affection returned exactly when she needed something. A week into my vacation, I decided it was time to come home. I called Trent. "Harold, how are you feeling? Ready to come back?" "I think so. Getting a bit lonely here." Of course, of course. When are you thinking?" "Maybe the day after tomorrow." There was a pause. I could practically hear the calculations happening in his head. "Actually, Harold, why don't you stay a bit longer? You sound like you could use more rest. Take another week. Brittany and I will keep everything perfect here." Translation: Give me more time to execute my plan. "Well, if you think that's best." "I do. Absolutely. You just relax. We've got everything under control." "I'm sure you do," I thought. That evening I called Lindsay from my hotel room. "How's everything progressing on your end?" "The trust is locked down tight. Everything's transferred. On paper, you own nothing. I'm the sole trustee. If anyone tried to steal from you right now, they'd be stealing from accounts that legally don't exist." "And the properties?" "The house on Camelback Road is completely protected. As for Monroe Street, I've been in touch with the bank that actually owns it. They're aware someone might try to forge documents for that address. They're cooperating fully." "Excellent. Uncle Harold, are you sure about this? Once Trent makes his move, there's no going back." I thought about Brittany calling me worthless old man in her text to Trent, about them laughing in my living room, About my daughter looking at me and seeing nothing but dollar signs. I'm sure. Okay, I'll be ready when you need me. 3 days before I was scheduled to return home, I received a text from Brittany. Dad, Trent and I were thinking, you've worked so hard your whole life. You should enjoy retirement without worrying about paperwork and bills and all that stuff. Let us handle it for you. We love you. The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. But I played along. That's very thoughtful, sweetheart. Let's talk when I get back. Her response was immediate. Can't wait? I spent my last evening in Sedona sitting on that hotel balcony, drinking coffee, watching the sunset paint the rocks in shades of orange and red. In less than 72 hours, Trent would make his move. He'd take that forged power of attorney to some notary who didn't know me, get it authenticated, and start draining accounts that didn't really exist. He thought he was so clever, thought he'd found the perfect mark. An old man alone, getting forgetful, with a fat bank account and valuable property. But he'd forgotten something crucial. I'd spent 40 years in this business. I'd seen every scam, every fraud, every forgery technique. I'd authenticated tens of thousands of signatures, could spot a fake from across a room. I knew every legal loophole, every protection mechanism, every way to shield assets from theft. Trent Cole was about to learn that some old men bite back. I returned home on a Tuesday morning. Trent and Brittany were waiting for me, all smiles and hugs. The house was spotless. Fresh flowers on the dining table. Coffee brewing in the kitchen. Welcome back, Harold. You look so rested. Trent gripped my hand, pulled me into one of those aggressive man hugs that's just a bit too tight. Brittany kissed my cheek. How was Sedona, Dad? Lovely, very peaceful. We sat in the living room and they asked about my trip. I kept my answers vague, played up being tired and a bit confused about some details. I saw them exchange glances. Good. Let them think I was deteriorating. After an hour of small talk, Trent leaned forward. Harold, Brittany and I have been talking. We're really worried about you living here alone. It's a big house, lots to manage. I manage fine. Do you, though? We noticed some bills on your desk that hadn't been paid, and you forgot to lock the back door twice last week. Both lies, of course, but I nodded slowly, pretended to be concerned. Did I? You did. And that's okay. It happens. But that's why we think you should let us help. Officially. Here it comes. Brittany placed her hand on mine. Dad, we want you to sign some documents. Give Trent power of attorney, just temporarily, so he can help manage things, pay bills, handle the house, make sure everything's taken care of. I looked at her hand on mine. Her nails were freshly manicured. Probably cost $75. My money, most likely. I don't know. That seems like a big step. Trent's smile tightened. It's really not. It's completely standard. People do it all the time, and you can revoke it whenever you want. We just want to help. I let the silence stretch, watched them squirm. Let me think about it, I finally said. Brittany's grip on my hand tightened. Dad, please. We're trying to protect you. I said I'll think about it. Trent stood abruptly. Fine. Think about it. But Harold, you need to face reality. You're not getting any younger. Things are slipping through the cracks. We're trying to help before something serious happens. They left shortly after, tension crackling between us. I watched them drive away, then immediately pulled out my tablet and reviewed the camera footage from while I was gone. They'd been in my study 14 times. 14. Photographing documents, discussing strategies, planning their approach. In one video, Brittany sat at my desk practicing my signature. We need to be able to forge this if the power of attorney thing doesn't work, she said. Trent laughed. Your dad's such a sucker. He actually believes we care. He's always been gullible. Remember when I convinced him I needed $5,000 for dental work 3 years ago? Spent it on a purse. They high-fived. Actually high-fived over stealing from me. I saved every video, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and sent copies to Lindsay. The next morning, I called Trent, put on my most defeated voice. I've been thinking about what you said. You're right. I do need help. Can you come over today? Of course. We'll be there in 20 minutes. They arrived with a folder of documents, pre-printed power of attorney forms, financial authorization forms, documents that would give Trent complete control over what he thought were my assets. We sat at my dining table. Trent spread the papers out, explaining each one with false patience. This one lets me access your bank accounts. This one allows me to make decisions about the property. This one authorizes me to sign on your behalf. I picked up a pen, looked at the documents. My hand hovered over the signature line. Are you sure this is necessary? I asked one more time, giving them a chance to back out. Completely necessary, Brittany said firmly. It's for your own good. I signed. Every document. Watched Trent's eyes light up with each signature. Perfect! This is perfect, Harold. You won't regret this. We'll take such good care of everything. They practically ran out of my house, documents clutched in Trent's hands like lottery tickets. I sat there for a long moment, then called Lindsay. It's done. He has the documents. Are you sure they're the decoys? Positive. He now has legal authorization to access accounts containing $300 total and claim ownership of a property that belongs to a bank. And the real documents? Safely with you. Everything of actual value is protected in the trust. Okay, now we wait. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, early in the morning, I received a fraud alert from one of the decoy bank accounts. Someone was attempting to access it. I smiled, picked up my phone, and called the bank. Yes, this is Harold Bishop. I'd like to report unauthorized access to my account. Sir, we show that someone with a valid power of attorney is attempting to make a withdrawal. That power of attorney is forged. I never authorized that document. I'd like to file an official complaint. There was a pause. Sir, that's a serious allegation. Are you certain? Completely certain. I have video evidence of the forgery. I'll need to speak with your fraud department and the police. I'll transfer you immediately. Over the next several hours, I made similar calls to 3 other banks, filed police reports, contacted the real estate fraud division about someone attempting to fraudulently sell the Monroe Street property. Each call, each report, building the case. That afternoon, Trent called me. His voice was tight, strained. Harold, there's been a problem at the bank. They're saying the documents aren't valid. What documents? The power of attorney, the ones you signed. I don't know what you're talking about, Trent. I never signed any power of attorney. Yes, you did. 2 days ago, at your dining table. I let the confusion bleed into my voice. Trent, I don't remember that. Are you feeling okay? Harold, don't play games. You signed them. Brittany was there, too. I really don't recall. Maybe you should come over and we can sort this out. He hung up. I could imagine his panic, his mind racing, trying to figure out what went wrong. But here's what Trent didn't understand. Those weren't the real documents I'd signed. Those were copies I'd prepared, with signatures that were close enough to look legitimate to an untrained eye, but different enough that any forensic analysis would prove them false. The real documents, the ones with my actual legal signatures, those were locked in Lindsay's office safe, dated months before Trent ever tried his scam. I'd built a perfect trap. He had documents he thought authorized him to steal my money. He'd already attempted to access the accounts, creating a paper trail of fraud. When the police investigated, they'd find his forged power of attorney, his attempts to drain accounts, his plans to sell property that wasn't mine to sell. And all I had to do was claim confusion. I never signed those documents, officer. I'm an old man. Maybe I'm losing my memory, but I would never authorize my son-in-law to take my money. My phone buzzed. A text from Lindsay. Detective Robert Young from the Economic Crimes Division wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. He's very interested in your case. I typed back. Perfect. Tell him I'll bring the video evidence. That evening I sat in my study, surrounded by my collection of antique seals and stamps. Picked up a Victorian-era seal from 1847. Ran my fingers over the intricate design. These pieces represented authenticity, legitimacy, the sacred trust between a notary and the public. Trent had violated that trust, had used my own profession against me. Tomorrow, I'd sit down with Detective Young, show him the videos of Trent forging documents, the bank records showing attempted fraud, the evidence of conspiracy between Trent and Brittany. And then Trent Cole would learn that some documents are real, some are fake, and the difference between them can cost you everything. 3 days passed, 3 days of watching Trent execute his plan with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. Through my various contacts in the banking system, I tracked every move. He'd successfully withdrawn the money from the decoy accounts using the forged power of attorney. The full $127,000 transferred to his personal account in two separate transactions to avoid immediate red flags. The property sale was even more elaborate. Trent had found a real estate investor named Marcus Chen, someone looking for a quick flip. The sale of 1523 West Monroe Street was proceeding through what appeared to be a legitimate escrow account. Papers were signed, documents were notarized by someone in Maricopa County who didn't know me, didn't know my signature well enough to spot the subtle modifications I'd built into the forgery. On paper, Trent now had access to $612,000. In reality, he had $3,200 in actual money and a whole lot of federal charges heading his way. Late afternoon on the third day, my phone rang. Trent's number. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice neutral. "Harold, I've got incredible news." His voice practically vibrated with excitement. In the background, I could hear music, laughter, the clink of glasses. They were celebrating. "What news is that, Trent?" "Well, I know you've been worried about your financial situation, all those accounts, the property. It's so much to manage at your age. So Brittany and we've taken care of everything for you." I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. "Harold, are you there?" "I'm here. What exactly have you taken care of?" "We've liquidated your assets, sold the house, cleared out your bank accounts. You don't have to worry about managing any of it anymore. We're using the money to start our new life together. Tomorrow we're flying to Vegas for our wedding. It's going to be amazing. The Venetian presidential suite. The works. You sold my house. For a great price, $485,000. And the bank accounts, another $127,000. That's over $612,000 total, Harold. We're set for life." My hand tightened on the phone. "And you think this was yours to take?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "Take? Harold, you signed those documents. You gave me power of attorney. This was all legal. You're just too old to understand what you agreed to." "I see. So here's how this works. We're leaving tomorrow afternoon, getting married tomorrow night. You can spend whatever's left of your retirement figuring out what to do next. Maybe find a nice nursing home. Bye, worthless old man. Enjoy your golden years in poverty." More laughter in the background. Brittany's voice, high and excited. "Tell him we're not coming back." Trent was practically shouting now. "You hear that, Harold? We're done playing family. We've got our money. We've got our future. And you've got nothing." I let the moment breathe. When I spoke, my voice was ice cold. "Trent, are you absolutely certain you looked at the right documents?" The laughter stopped. "What?" "Those documents you photographed. Those accounts you accessed. Are you sure they were the ones you think they were?" Silence. I could almost hear his brain working, trying to process what I'd said. "What are you talking about? The money's in my account right now. I can see it." "Can you, though? Have you tried to withdraw it? Move it? Or are you just seeing numbers on a screen?" "Harold, stop playing games. You're just bitter because—" "I'm not playing games, Trent. But you are, and the house always wins." "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "It means you should enjoy your celebration. Tomorrow's going to be very interesting." "You're bluffing. You're just an old man who got outsmarted by people younger and smarter than you." "Perhaps. I guess we'll see tomorrow, won't we? Have a wonderful evening, Trent. Oh, and Trent?" "What?" "I'll see you tomorrow, but not in Vegas." I hung up before he could respond. For a moment I sat there in my study, surrounded by my antique seals and documents, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Then I stood, grabbed my car keys, and headed out. I had a 2-hour drive back to Phoenix from Sedona, and I needed to be home before midnight. The highway was dark, desert stretching out on both sides under a canopy of stars. I drove on autopilot, my mind going through every step of the plan. Lindsay had already confirmed the living trust was ironclad. The real property, the real accounts, everything of actual value was completely protected and legally mine through the trust structure. What Trent had stolen was smoke and mirrors. The Monroe Street property belonged to First Arizona Bank, foreclosed 6 months ago. The sale he'd arranged? The buyer was actually an undercover investigator working with the police. The escrow account, monitored and controlled. The $485,000, never existed outside of falsified documents. The bank accounts he'd drained, I'd opened them specifically for this purpose, with minimum balances. The statements he'd photographed showing $127,000, printed on authentic bank letterhead I'd saved from my working days, but completely fabricated. The actual amount in those accounts? $3,200 total. Enough to make his theft real, but a fraction of what he thought he'd stolen. I pulled into my driveway just after 11 o'clock. Not the house on Camelback Road that Trent thought he'd sold. My real house, the one held in the trust, on a quiet street 3 miles away. The lights were off. Everything was peaceful. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea and pulled out my phone. Opened the text chain with Detective Robert Young from the Phoenix Police Department's Economic Crimes Division. We'd been in contact for weeks, ever since I'd first approached him about potential fraud. I typed, "The bait is taken. He accessed the accounts and believes he sold the property. Total claimed theft, $612,000. Actual theft, $3,200. He's flying to Las Vegas tomorrow. Flight 2847 departing Sky Harbor at 2:30 p.m. I have all video evidence ready for review." His response came within minutes. "Perfect. Meet me at the station tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Bring everything. We'll have the arrest warrant ready by noon." I set the phone down and looked around my study. 30 years of collected seals and stamps, each one representing authenticity, legitimacy, trust. Trent had violated all of that, had used his knowledge of my profession to forge documents, to steal, to betray. Tomorrow he'd learn that the legal system I'd spent 4 decades upholding doesn't take kindly to document forgery, especially not federal document forgery involving interstate fraud. I finished my tea and went to bed. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. I arrived at the Phoenix Police Department at 6:45 the next morning, a folder thick with evidence under my arm. The building on West Washington Street was already busy, officers coming and going for the morning shift change. Detective Robert Young met me in the lobby. He's 52, gray at the temples, with the weathered look of someone who's seen every type of financial crime humanity can devise. We shook hands. "Mr. Bishop, right on time." "Detective, thank you for seeing me." He led me through security and up to the 3rd floor to a conference room with a large table and a wall-mounted screen. My niece Lindsay was already there, legal documents spread out in front of her. "Uncle Harold." She stood, gave me a quick hug. "Are you ready for this?" "More than ready." For the next 2 hours, we walked Detective Young through everything. I started with the timeline, explained how I'd first noticed Trent's suspicious behavior months ago, showed him the video footage from my hidden cameras. The detective watched, stone-faced, as Trent crept through my study on the screen, photographing documents. His expression didn't change when we showed him Trent practicing my signature, or when Brittany laughed about me being too senile to notice. "These recordings are admissible," Lindsay confirmed. "Arizona is a one-party consent state. Uncle Harold had every right to record activities in his own home without informing them." "Good." Detective Young made notes. "What about the financial transactions?" I pulled out the bank statements. "Here's what Trent thinks he stole. $127,000 across 4 accounts. Here's what was actually in those accounts. $3,200 total. I opened them specifically as decoy accounts, with minimum balances to keep them active." "And the property sale," Lindsay took over. "The property at 1523 West Monroe Street is owned by First Arizona Bank. It was foreclosed in January and has been sitting empty. There's no way it could legally be sold by Harold, or anyone claiming to represent him. The deed Trent used was fabricated by my uncle as part of the trap." Detective Young leaned back in his chair. "So what we have is attempted grand theft, identity theft, forgery of legal documents, and fraud. What about the interstate angle?" "Trent's planning to take the money to Nevada," I said. "He's flying to Las Vegas this afternoon for his wedding. The money was intended to cross state lines, which makes this federal." As if on cue, there was a knock on the door. A man in his mid-40s entered, wearing a dark suit and an FBI badge on his belt. "Special Agent Dennis Hunt," he introduced himself. "I understand we have an interstate fraud case?" Detective Young briefed him quickly. Agent Hunt listened, his expression growing colder with each detail. Document forgery across state lines, attempted wire fraud, identity theft with intent to commit interstate commerce violations, He looked at me. Mr. Bishop, you've built an airtight case here. I'd like the Bureau to take point on this. Whatever puts Trent Cole behind bars for the longest time, I said simply. They conferred for a few minutes, talking in low voices about jurisdiction and charges. I caught phrases like federal sentencing guidelines and consecutive sentences and no early release. Finally, Detective Young turned back to me. Mr. Bishop, we're ready to proceed. I need you to file an official complaint, and then we'll get the arrest warrant. Given that he's planning to flee the state this afternoon, we'll execute the warrant at the airport before his flight. The word flee settled heavy in the air. That's exactly what it was. Fleeing with stolen money to start a new life in another state. I signed the complaint. My hand was steady, my signature perfect. All those years as a notary, I could still produce a flawless signature even under stress. There's one more thing, Lindsay said quietly. She slid a document across the table. Brittany Bishop Cole was an active participant. Her text messages and emails show she helped plan this, encouraged it, and benefited from it. She's not an innocent party. Agent Hunt reviewed the evidence. Conspiracy to commit fraud. She'll be charged as well. I felt something twist in my chest. My daughter. But I pushed the feeling down. She'd made her choice. When do you arrest them? I asked. Their flight leaves at 2:30, Detective Young said. We'll have a team at Sky Harbor at 2:15. Plain clothes, federal agents. We'll take them in the terminal after they've checked in. Public arrest sends a message. About that, I said, make it very public. Let everyone see what happens when you forge documents and steal from family. Detective Young smiled grimly. I think we can arrange that. We spent another hour going through final details. I provided copies of every video, every document, every piece of evidence. Lindsay walked them through the legal structure of the living trust, proving beyond any doubt that the property Trent claimed to have sold was never mine to sell, and the accounts he'd drained were decoys. At 9:15, I looked at the clock on the conference room wall. They're probably just waking up, I said, checking that the money's still in the account, planning their big day. Let them plan, Agent Hunt said. They've got about 5 hours of freedom left. After that, the next decade and a half looks very different for Mr. Cole. I gathered my papers, thanked everyone, and left the police station with Lindsay. We stood outside in the Phoenix morning sun, the temperature already climbing toward 90 degrees. Uncle Harold, are you sure about this? Lindsay asked. Once they're arrested, there's no taking it back. Brittany is going to face serious charges. I know. She's your daughter. And she stopped being my daughter the moment she decided I was nothing more than a bank account. I looked at my niece. Lindsay, you're more family to me than Brittany's been in 3 years. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Lindsay nodded slowly. Okay. I'll meet you at your place later, after it's done. I drove home, made myself breakfast, and tried to go about my normal routine. But my eyes kept drifting to the clock. 10 o'clock, 11, noon. Somewhere across Phoenix, Trent and Brittany were packing for Vegas, dreaming about their new life, probably laughing about how easy it was to fool the old man. 1 o'clock, they'd be leaving their hotel soon, heading to the airport. Trent would be checking his bank account one more time, marveling at all those zeros. 2 o'clock. Right about now, they'd be pulling into Sky Harbor Airport, pulling up to the departure terminal, unloading their bags. I sat in my study, surrounded by my collection of antique seals, and waited. My phone was on the desk. Any minute now, I'd get a text from Detective Young. At 2:23, my phone buzzed. Subject's in custody. You were right. He checked his account right before we moved in. The look on his face when he saw the badges was priceless. I smiled, set the phone down, walked to my liquor cabinet, and poured myself a small glass of bourbon. Here's to justice, I thought, and to the power of really good documentation. Somewhere in Sky Harbor Airport, Trent Cole was learning that the hardest lessons cost the most. Detective Young's text didn't give me details about the arrest itself, but Lindsay called an hour later with the full story. Uncle Harold, you should have seen it, she said, barely containing her excitement. I was there when they brought them in. Trent walked into that airport like he owned it. Designer luggage, first-class tickets, checking his phone every 30 seconds to look at that bank balance. Brittany was posting on Instagram about their dream wedding right up until the moment the cuffs went on. I listened as Lindsay described the scene. Trent and Brittany had arrived at Sky Harbor around 1:45 that afternoon, checked their bags, breezed through security. They'd gone to a coffee shop in the departure terminal, ordering expensive lattes, laughing, planning their future. They had no idea, Lindsay said. Detective Young and Agent Hunt were watching from different positions. Plain clothes, just two more travelers. They waited until Trent was mid-sip of his coffee, 15 minutes before boarding. The arrest team approached from 4 directions. 2 Phoenix detectives in casual clothes, 2 FBI agents in business suits, converging on the coffee shop table where Trent and Brittany sat, surrounded by shopping bags from the airport boutiques. "Mr. Trent Cole?" Detective Young had said, badge already visible. According to Lindsay, Trent's first reaction was confusion. He looked up from his phone, smiled that charming smile of his. "Yes? Can I help you?" "You're under arrest for forgery, wire fraud, identity theft, and interstate fraud conspiracy." The smile had frozen, then slowly melted. "What? There must be some mistake." "No mistake." Detective Young produced the warrant. "Hands on the table, please." That's when Brittany started screaming. "What are you doing? We didn't do anything. This is harassment." Agent Hunt had turned to her, his face granite. "Ms. Bishop Cole, you're also being detained on suspicion of conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Lindsay told me Brittany's face went through 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, disbelief, panic, rage, and finally something that looked like calculation. She'd immediately tried to pull the victim card. "My father! This is about my father, isn't it? He's confused. He's old. He doesn't know what he's saying. We were trying to help him." But the handcuffs were already clicking shut. Detective Young read them their Miranda rights, while airport travelers stopped to watch. Phones out, recording. A couple would later post the videos online. I saw them eventually. Trent, pale as paper, being led away in handcuffs. Brittany, mascara starting to run, screaming about lawyers and mistakes and my father's senile. The best part, according to Lindsay, was when they walked past the departure board. The screen showing their flight to Las Vegas. Boarding in 10 minutes. The flight they'd never take. The wedding that would never happen. "Trent looked at that board," Lindsay said, "and something just broke in him, like reality finally hit. He tried to pull away from the detective, started babbling about the money being real, the documents being legal, everything being legitimate." "Did he mention my name?" I asked. "About 50 times. Harold signed those papers. Harold gave me permission. Harold's just confused." "Over and over," I smiled. Of course he did. That was exactly what I'd predicted he'd do. They'd been taken to the Phoenix Police Department downtown, separated immediately, put in different interrogation rooms. Standard procedure. Don't let conspirators coordinate their stories. Lindsay had watched through the one-way glass as Detective Young questioned Trent. She described how Trent had started confident, insisting there was a mistake, demanding his lawyer, threatening lawsuits. "Then Detective Young put the first video on the screen," Lindsay said, "the one where Trent's photographing your documents in the study. Trent went quiet, just stared. Young let it play for maybe 30 seconds, then paused it. What did Trent say?" "Nothing at first, just stared at his own image on the screen. Then he said, 'How did you get that?' And Young said, 'Mr. Bishop's been documenting your activities for 3 months. Every break-in, every forgery, every stolen document. We have it all.'" I could imagine Trent's face, the moment when he realized this wasn't a mistake. This was a trap, and he'd walked right into it. Young showed him the videos of him practicing your signature, the footage of him at the bank, using the forged power of attorney, the transaction records showing him withdrawing the money. All of it, time-stamped, dated, catalogued. How long before he asked for a lawyer? About 15 minutes, but by then the damage was done. He'd already said enough to bury himself, kept claiming you'd authorized everything, that he had legitimate documents, that he was just trying to help you. The beauty of it was that every word out of Trent's mouth made it worse. The more he insisted he'd had my permission, the more clearly he demonstrated his intent to defraud. The more he claimed the documents were legitimate, the more obvious his forgery became. In the other interrogation room, Brittany was having her own breakdown. She'd started with denial, moved to victimhood, tried to blame Trent for everything. I didn't know what he was doing. He told me Dad had signed papers. I believed him. I'm innocent. But they'd found her texts, her emails, conversations where she'd actively helped plan the scheme, suggested ways to manipulate me, discussed how to spend the money. In one message she'd written, "Make sure the old man doesn't suspect anything until we're already in Vegas. By then, it'll be too late." That message alone proved conspiracy. Lindsay told me they'd been booked, photographed, fingerprinted. Bail was set high. Trent at $500,000, Brittany at $250,000. Neither could make it. Neither had assets anymore. The money in Trent's account was frozen pending investigation. They'd both spend the night in holding cells. "Your daughter asked about you," Lindsay said quietly. "Asked if you were pressing charges or if you'd drop them. Asked if she could talk to you." "What did they tell her?" "That you'd filed a formal complaint. That the state of Arizona and the FBI were prosecuting. That this was out of your hands now." Which wasn't entirely true. I could ask them to reduce charges, show mercy, but I wouldn't. Brittany had made her choice when she looked at me and saw a bank account instead of a father. "There's something else," Lindsay said. "Brittany's Instagram, her last post, the one about the best day of her life, it's gone viral. People are sharing it with the arrest footage. The contrast is, it's everywhere." I thought about that, my daughter's smiling face, radiating fake happiness and greed, juxtaposed with her shocked expression and handcuffs. The internet loves that kind of dramatic irony. "How do you feel?" Lindsay asked. I sat there in my study, looking at my collection of antique seals, 150 years of legitimate documents, authentic signatures, real authority, everything Trent had tried to fake. "Like justice is finally being served," I said. The next morning I woke to 17 missed calls. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize. 2 were from Brittany's cell phone, which police had returned to her after extracting all the data. 1 was from an unknown number that turned out to be the county jail. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I drove downtown to the prosecutor's office for a meeting with Assistant District Attorney Sarah Morrison. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of intensity that comes from winning cases. "Mr. Bishop," she shook my hand, "I've been reviewing your evidence. This is one of the most thoroughly documented fraud cases I've seen in 15 years. I wanted to make sure there were no loopholes. There aren't. The video evidence alone is damning. Combined with the financial records, the forged documents, the communication records between the defendants, this is airtight." We spent an hour going through the charges: forgery of legal documents, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted grand theft. The list went on. With the FBI involved, most charges would be federal, carrying mandatory minimum sentences. "The federal prosecutor is talking 15 to 20 years for Mr. Cole," Morrison said. "Ms. Bishop Cole is looking at 5 to 7 as an accomplice." I felt something twist in my chest at that, but I kept my expression neutral. What if they try to make a deal? They already are. Trent's public defender contacted us this morning. Wants to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for testimony against others. Others? There are no others. It was just him and Brittany. Morrison smiled thinly. "Exactly. He's desperate, grasping at straws. We told him no deal. The evidence is too strong. We don't need his cooperation." "And Brittany?" "Her lawyer's trying a different angle. Claims she was manipulated by Trent. That she's a victim too. That her father is elderly and confused. She's asking for leniency." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm not confused, and she's not a victim." "I know. We have her texts. She was an active participant." Morrison paused. "Mr. Bishop, I need to ask. Are you prepared to testify if this goes to trial?" "Absolutely. It won't be pleasant. You'll be cross-examined. They'll try to paint you as a vindictive father, or claim you're mentally incompetent, or suggest you entrap them. Let them try. I have documentation of every step. Dates, times, witnesses. My niece Lindsay was involved in the asset protection planning. She can corroborate everything. The banks have records. The videos speak for themselves." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Good, because Trent's lawyer is already floating a defense strategy. They're claiming you deliberately created this situation, That you knew what Trent was planning and set him up instead of stopping him. I'd expected this. Entrapment. Exactly. They'll argue you baited him into committing fraud. Entrapment requires a law enforcement officer to induce someone to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit. I'm not law enforcement, and Trent came up with this scheme on his own. I just provided him with documents he thought were real. That's our position too, but be prepared. The defense will make you out to be a manipulative mastermind. Better than being a naive victim, she smiled. I like you, Mr. Bishop. Most victims in these cases are so shocked they can barely function. You planned this like a chess game. I spent 4 decades authenticating documents and preventing fraud. When someone tried to defraud me, I used what I knew. Over the next several days, the case built momentum. The prosecutor's office filed formal charges. Federal charges came down from the FBI. Bail hearings were held. Bail was denied due to flight risk. Trent and Brittany would stay in custody until trial. I received another call from the jail. This time I answered. Dad? Brittany's voice was small, broken, nothing like the cold woman who'd helped plan my destruction. Brittany! Dad, please, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I was influenced by Trent. He manipulated me. I didn't understand what we were doing was wrong. You didn't understand that forging my signature and stealing my money was wrong? It's not like that. I thought... Dad, please drop the charges. I'm your daughter. I'll pay you back. I'll do whatever you want. Just please. You stopped being my daughter 3 years ago, I said calmly. You looked at me and saw an obstacle, an inconvenient old man with too much money. You celebrated stealing from me. You called me worthless. I didn't mean it. I was angry. You meant every word. I kept my voice level, factual. You and Trent planned this for months. You helped him forge documents. You coached him on how to manipulate me. You were going to fly to Las Vegas with my money and start a new life while I had nothing. But the money wasn't even real. The house wasn't yours. You tricked us. There it was. Not remorse for what she'd done. Anger that my trap had worked. I protected my assets, I said. Something you forced me to do. The intent to steal was real. The forgery was real. The betrayal was real. Those are the crimes you're paying for. Dad, I'm in jail. In jail. Do you know what it's like here? I imagine it's unpleasant, but that's what happens when you commit federal fraud. Please, she was crying now. I'll do anything. Just help me. You're my father, and you were my daughter. Were, past tense. You made your choice. Now you live with it. I hung up before she could respond. Lindsay called an hour later. Trent's trying to negotiate. He's offering to testify that Brittany was the ringleader, that she planned everything, that he was just following her instructions and throwing her under the bus to save himself. Exactly. His lawyer's pitching him as the real victim here. Young man manipulated by his older, more experienced girlfriend, led into crime he didn't fully understand. I almost laughed. He's 34. He's a real estate agent who specializes in document fraud. He knew exactly what he was doing. The prosecutor knows that. They're not buying it, but it shows how desperate he is. He's willing to destroy Brittany to reduce his sentence. What about Brittany's response? Oh, she's fighting back. Her lawyer filed a motion claiming Trent coerced her, that she feared him, that she only participated because he threatened her. So now they were both trying to betray each other. The partnership that was going to fund their Vegas wedding was falling apart in mutual recrimination. It was almost poetic. Let them fight, I said. The evidence will speak louder than either of their lies. That evening I sat in my study with a glass of bourbon, watching the sunset through my window. My real house in my real neighborhood, filled with my real possessions. Everything protected, everything safe. My phone buzzed, a text from Detective Young. Update, Trent Cole's public defender just withdrew. Conflict of interest. New lawyer being appointed. This is going to drag out. I typed back, I have time. Because that was the truth. I had time. I had resources. I had the law on my side. And most importantly, I had the truth, documented and irrefutable. Trent and Brittany could scramble, could lie, could point fingers at each other. But at the end of all of it, the evidence would remain. Video of Trent forging my signature, bank records showing the theft, text messages proving conspiracy. No amount of legal maneuvering could change those facts. I raised my glass to the sunset, to justice, to the power of preparation, and to the lesson that some people only learn when it's already too late. The weeks that followed the arrest moved with the methodical precision of a well-oiled legal machine. The prosecution built their case piece by piece, and I watched it unfold with a mix of satisfaction and something heavier I couldn't quite name. Lindsay kept me updated daily. The investigation had expanded beyond what even I'd anticipated. Forensic accountants were dissecting every transaction. Digital forensics experts were recovering deleted messages, emails, browser histories. The picture they painted was damning. The property at 1523 West Monroe Street turned out to be exactly what I'd known it was, a foreclosed home owned by First Arizona Bank, sitting empty and unsellable due to title issues. The bank confirmed they'd never authorized any sale. The buyer Trent had found was actually an undercover investigator working with Detective Young, part of a sting operation targeting real estate fraud. The escrow account? Fake. The $485,000 from the property sale? Never existed outside of documents I'd carefully fabricated using legitimate letterhead and forms from my decades as a notary. Every signature was mine, every seal authentic, but the underlying transactions were fiction. The bank accounts were even more interesting. When the forensic team analyzed them, they found that I'd opened those accounts with minimal balances, just enough to keep them active. The statements Trent had photographed showing $127,000. I'd created those using genuine bank software templates I'd accumulated over the years, printed on authentic bank paper. They looked completely legitimate, but the actual accounts contained only $3,200 total. That $3,200 was the only real money Trent had stolen. But under federal law, his intent to steal $612,000, combined with the forged power of attorney and the interstate aspect of the crime, made it a major felony. The federal prosecutor, a stern woman named Catherine Walsh, explained it to me during one of our meetings. Mr. Bishop, your son-in-law is facing mandatory minimum sentencing, document forgery, wire fraud, identity theft, and interstate fraud conspiracy. We're looking at 15 to 20 years federal time. And Brittany? Ms. Bishop Cole's text messages and emails prove active participation. She wasn't just aware of the scheme, she helped plan it. She's looking at 5 to 7 years. I sat with that information. My daughter would spend her 30s in prison. The Instagram influencer life she'd craved would be replaced with orange jumpsuits and concrete walls. Do you feel any remorse? Lindsay asked me later that day as we sat in her office. I thought about it. No. Should I? She's your daughter. She was my daughter. The girl I raised would never have done this. That person is gone. This is just consequences. The trial date was set for late summer, but as it turned out, there wouldn't be a trial. 3 weeks before the scheduled court date, both defendants pleaded guilty. Their lawyers had finally convinced them that fighting was futile. The evidence was overwhelming. Video, audio, documents, digital forensics, testimony from bank employees, notaries, real estate agents. Every single element of their scheme documented and preserved. Trent's plea deal attempted to reduce his sentence by claiming diminished capacity, arguing he'd been desperate due to gambling debts. The prosecutor rejected it. Brittany's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim of Trent's manipulation. The text messages where she'd written, "Make sure the old man doesn't suspect until we're in Vegas," destroyed that defense. Both pled guilty to all charges. The only question remaining was sentencing. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for early autumn. I arrived at the federal courthouse downtown with Lindsay at my side. The building was imposing, all marble and security, the kind of place where justice isn't just served, it's carved in stone. We passed through security, took the elevator to the 7th floor. The courtroom was formal, wood-paneled, with the seal of the federal judiciary mounted behind the judge's bench. Trent and Brittany were brought in separately, both in orange prison jumpsuits, both shackled. They looked different than I remembered. Trent had lost weight, his face gaunt, his confident smile long gone. Brittany looked exhausted, her hair pulled back, no makeup, no Instagram-ready appearance. They saw me sitting in the gallery, and I watched their reactions. Trent's jaw clenched, hatred flashing in his eyes. Brittany's face crumpled, tears starting immediately. She mouthed something to me. "Please," I looked away. The judge entered. The Honorable Margaret Chen, a federal district judge with a reputation for being fair but harsh on white-collar crime. Everyone stood, then sat, as she took her place. "United States of America versus Trent Cole and Brittany Bishop Cole," she began. "We're here for sentencing following guilty pleas to multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." The prosecutor laid out the crimes. Every detail. The planning, the execution, the celebration, the intent to flee the state. The complete disregard for the law and for family bonds. Then it was the defense's turn. Trent's lawyer argued for leniency, citing his gambling addiction as a mitigating factor. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole is a young man who made terrible mistakes under the pressure of debt. He needs treatment, not decades in prison." Judge Chen's expression didn't change. Brittany's lawyer tried a different approach. "Your Honor, Miss Bishop Cole has expressed deep remorse. She's a first-time offender who was led astray by Mr. Cole. She asks the court for mercy." The judge looked at Brittany. "Ms. Bishop Cole, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Brittany stood shakily. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm so sorry. I was stupid and greedy, and I hurt my father, the man who raised me alone after my mother died. I thought I was owed something, owed a better life, and I convinced myself that taking his money was justified. It wasn't. None of it was. I destroyed my relationship with my father for money that wasn't even real. I destroyed my future for nothing. I'm so sorry." She looked at me again. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm sorry." Judge Chen nodded. "Anything else?" "No, Your Honor." "Mr. Cole?" Trent stood. For a moment I thought he might actually apologize. Instead he said, "Your Honor, I object to the characterization of these crimes. Harold Bishop deliberately set a trap. He created false documents knowing I would find them. He wanted me to commit fraud so he could prosecute me. This is entrapment." The judge's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Cole, you've already pled guilty. Entrapment is not a defense available to you at this stage. Do you have anything else to say?" "This is unjust. I stole $3,000, not $600,000. The victim wasn't even harmed. His real assets were protected. This is vindictive prosecution." "Are you finished? This is revenge, not justice. Sit down, Mr. Cole." He sat, glaring at me across the courtroom. Judge Chen reviewed her notes. Then she looked up. "I've reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, the evidence, and the statements from counsel. These crimes represent a profound betrayal of trust. Mr. Cole, you targeted your girlfriend's elderly father, forged legal documents, and attempted to steal his life savings. The fact that you were unsuccessful due to Mr. Bishop's foresight doesn't mitigate your intent. You planned, executed, and celebrated this fraud. Ms. Bishop Cole, you participated willingly in defrauding your own father. Your text messages show not remorse, but glee." She paused. "The law is clear on the appropriate sentences for these crimes." I leaned forward. "Trent Cole," Judge Chen said, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom, "I hereby sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, 10 years for document forgery and identity theft, 5 years consecutive for wire fraud and interstate fraud conspiracy. You will serve a minimum of 10 years before eligibility for release. You are further ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $573,000 to Harold Bishop, representing compensation for emotional distress, legal fees, investigation costs, and punitive damages." Trent's face went white. His legs buckled, and he grabbed the edge of the defense table to stay upright. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no sound coming out. "But I didn't. The money wasn't real. This isn't fair." His voice cracked, rising to something close to a shout. 15 years for $3,000? Judge Chen's gaze was ice. "Mr. Cole, you're not being sentenced for stealing $3,000. You're being sentenced for attempting to steal over $600,000, for forging federal documents, for identity theft, and for conspiracy to commit interstate fraud. In the eyes of the law, intent and action carry equal weight. Your careful planning and execution of this scheme demonstrate clear criminal intent. The fact that Mr. Bishop protected his assets doesn't absolve you of your crimes." Trent collapsed into his chair. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but Trent shrugged it off violently. He turned in his seat, staring at me with pure hatred. I held his gaze, kept my expression neutral. After a moment, he looked away. Brittany Bishop Cole, the judge continued, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory to identity theft. Upon release, you will serve 3 years of supervised probation. You are jointly responsible with Mr. Cole for the $523,000 restitution to Harold Bishop. Brittany crumpled. She actually fell to her knees, hands covering her face, sobbing. No, please, Your Honor, please, I can't. 5 years? I'm 32 years old. When I get out, I'll be 37, Judge Chen said flatly. Old enough to have learned this lesson. Old enough to rebuild a life based on honesty instead of fraud. Dad! Brittany turned to me, reaching out despite the shackles. Dad, please, tell them you forgive me. Tell them to reduce the sentence. You can do something. You have to. I stood up. The courtroom went quiet. Every eye turned to me. I walked to the barrier separating the gallery from the well of the court, looked down at my daughter, on her knees, face streaked with tears and desperation. Brittany, I said quietly, you stopped being my daughter the day you called me a worthless old man, the day you and Trent laughed about stealing from me, the day you chose money over family. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you're facing consequences, but you're not sorry for what you did. If that money had been real, if you'd made it to Las Vegas, you'd be married right now, living off my stolen assets, and I'd probably be in some state facility, wondering where my life went wrong. She shook her head violently. No, I would have helped you. You told Trent to make sure I didn't suspect until you were already in Vegas. By then it'll be too late. That's what you wrote. Your own words, Brittany. Her face twisted. You trapped us. You set us up. I protected myself from thieves. That's all. You made every choice that led you here. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have nothing more to say. Judge Chen nodded. Mr. Bishop, do you wish to address the court further? Only this. I spent 4 decades as a notary public. My job was to verify authenticity, to stand as a witness to legitimate transactions, to uphold the integrity of legal documents. When someone forges signatures, they don't just commit fraud. They attack the foundation of trust that holds our entire legal system together. Mr. Cole didn't just betray me personally. He betrayed every honest transaction, every legitimate contract, every real notary who does their job with integrity. I looked at Trent. You thought you were clever. You thought an old man wouldn't notice. You were wrong on both counts. Trent glared at me, his face flushed with impotent rage. You're a vindictive old man who couldn't stand seeing us happy. No, I said calmly. I'm a vindictive old man who couldn't stand being robbed. There's a difference. This isn't justice, Trent shouted. This is revenge. Judge Chen slammed her gavel. Mr. Cole, you will be silent, or you will be removed from this courtroom. One more outburst, and I'll add contempt charges. Trent shut his mouth, but his eyes burned with hatred. Good. Let him hate me. Hatred would keep him warm during the next 15 winters in federal prison. The sentences are final, Judge Chen said. The defendants will be remanded to federal custody immediately. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck again. U.S. Marshals moved forward to take Trent and Brittany away. Trent went silently now, his shoulders slumped, his cocky demeanor completely shattered. Brittany was still crying, being half carried by the marshals as they led her toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back one more time. Dad, I didn't respond, just watched as they took her through the door and out of sight. Lindsay touched my arm. Uncle Harold, are you okay? I took a deep breath, let it out slowly. Yeah, I think I am. We left the courthouse together, walking out into the September sunshine. Phoenix in autumn, the heat finally breaking, the sky that brilliant blue that comes after monsoon season ends. What now? Lindsay asked. Now? Life goes on. Over the following weeks, the details of the case became public. Local news ran the story. Daughter and boyfriend sentenced for elaborate fraud against retired notary. The contrast between Brittany's Instagram posts and her arrest photos went viral. People shared it as a cautionary tale about greed and social media narcissism. The wedding venue in Las Vegas sent me a letter asking if I wanted to claim the $85,000 deposit Trent had made. It took me 3 days to stop laughing at that. I told them to keep it. Consider it a lesson learned. Trent was sent to the Federal Correctional Institution in Tucson. Brittany went to a women's facility in California. I received notifications about their transfers, their locations, their projected release dates. I filed them away and tried not to think about it. Life did go on. I continued collecting antique seals and stamps, added 3 new pieces to my collection, including a rare seal from the Ottoman Empire, circa 1890. Beautiful craftsmanship, authentic documentation, everything a forgery can never be. Lindsay visited often. We'd have dinner, talk about her cases, about life. She never mentioned Brittany unless I brought it up, which I rarely did. One evening, months after the sentencing, I was in my study when I came across a photo album. Old pictures from when Brittany was young, her first day of school, her 11th birthday party, her high school graduation, standing next to me in cap and gown, smiling. I looked at that girl in the photos and tried to reconcile her with the woman in the orange jumpsuit, begging for mercy she didn't deserve. I couldn't do it. They were 2 different people. I closed the album, put it back on the shelf, poured myself a bourbon and sat in my chair looking out at the Phoenix skyline. Had I done the right thing? Absolutely. Would I do it again? Without hesitation. Did it hurt? More than I'd expected. Justice isn't always satisfying. Sometimes it's just necessary. You do what needs to be done. You protect what matters, and you live with the consequences of both your actions and the actions of others. Brittany made her choice when she looked at me and saw an obstacle instead of a father. Trent made his choice when he decided forgery was easier than honesty. They both paid for those choices. And me? I made my choice when I decided I had to fight back instead of becoming a victim. I protected my assets, my dignity, and the integrity of the legal system I'd served for 4 decades. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in California, my daughter was in a prison cell, probably watching the same sunset through bars. Somewhere in Tucson, Trent was doing the same. And here I was, in my home, with my freedom and my assets intact, sipping bourbon and collecting antique seals. Justice had been served. Life went on, and that sometimes is all you can ask for. I raised my glass to the sunset, to the future, and to the hard truth that some lessons cost everything to learn. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.